So
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Liz Faircloth. I am co-founder of Investor, and I'm really excited to be joined by Miles from Hospitable. He'll be telling you a little bit about Hospitable here in a moment, but what I'm most excited about this topic, right, is it's all about STR management. And I don't know about all of you, and just please put in the chat. Actually, before we do that, I'm jumping ahead here. Put in the chat where you're calling in from. I'd love to see that in the chat box. We always have a very engaged group. I'd love to hear where you're calling in from. What part of the world you're in would be great. So let's just do that first before I jump in to too much, if you don't mind. All right, Jersey. Hey, Angie, how are you? I think you're you're our tribe member. Good to see you on here. And if you have an STR, share in the chat STR or no STR, looking to buy an STR. That would be helpful, probably too, for Miles to know the audience who's in it, but that would be great. 2 STRs. Yeah, I thought you had a couple STRs, Angie. Yeah. Hey, Sarah, nice to see you on here. 1 STR, awesome. Very cool. And then as you join, please share where you're calling in from. And I realize, Sarah, you're in Mississippi now. Good to have you on. I thought you were in California. I feel like you were in California at one point. But anyway, glad to have you here. So want to jump in because we have some great content around STR management. And definitely right now, I don't know about all of you, right? So many people are cautiously doing deals. They're doing deals, but they're conservative. They're making sure the numbers work with everything happening, especially in your local market. And the best thing you could do is double down on management right now, managing the assets that you have even more efficiently and effectively. That's why I love what Hospitable brings to the table, especially on the STR side. And what we're going to be doing today is, or what we're going to be talking about, is how do you really maximize profits by better management? And you can. So, while everyone's like looking for the next deal or the new deal or getting frustrated on their deal flow, I would highly recommend, you certainly can look for new opportunities, but to manage what you have more efficiently and effectively and stabilize even more with even more precision is really one of the best things I think investors could be doing literally right now. It's probably helpful any time of the economy. I've been at this for 20 years, but I'd say now more than ever, it's probably one of the most important things to do as an investor. So without further ado, I want to invite Miles to jump on here. And thank you so much for being here. I know you lead up marketing and you're involved in your product development, which I love, and really very hands-on to making this property management software for STRs as user-friendly as you guys can, because I know in the conversations we've had. So without further ado, Miles, I'm going to let you take the ball here, and I'll be jumping into answer questions. I want people to ask questions, be present today.
Sweet. Sounds good. Thank you very much, Liz. And hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Yeah, hopefully, Liz, you can keep an eye on the chat. I can't actually see it right now as I'm sharing my screen, so please interject if anything comes up. If there's any questions, folks, please feel free to ask for out. I'm sure Liz is happy to interrupt and ask me any questions. As Liz already said, my name's Miles. I'm the head of marketing here at Hospitable. I'm based out of Toronto. I'm originally from the UK, and I've worked for Hospitable for about 3 years now. We are a short-term rental property management software. We also help folks that are managing mid-term rentals as well. And essentially, we are a software that helps you to kind of automate the process of managing a short-term rental. I might touch on a little bit about what we do later on again, but first off, we're going to dive into today's topic. And really, what I want to do is kind of pitch to you short-term rentals as a whole, and why you should absolutely have it as a place in your investment portfolio, even if you already own long-term rentals or mid-term rentals. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll understand the financial advantages, the tax benefits, and why managing might not be as much work as you think. So I already know from the chat there's a few people that are managing short-term rentals. Hopefully I educate you on a few additional benefits, and then hopefully we win over some people from long-term rental as well to check it out. Sweet. So yeah, kicking things off. I want to start with the obvious around short-term rentals that you've probably already heard before. Short-term rentals obviously typically offer a much higher return compared to traditional long-term rentals. We don't need to go into heavy detail on that here. You've probably seen the numbers or heard them from other investors before within the network. I'm sure that other folks have talked about that and the increased nightly rate that you can get on a short-term rental versus a long-term rental. But something that I kind of kick off by saying is I'd encourage you to go and figure out for yourself what you could get at a nightly rate for a short-term rental for any properties that you currently own or any properties that you're thinking about investing in. So if you want to check out airdna.co, that is an excellent resource for that. I would highly recommend it. You can just see it in the second to last line there on the slide. That's basically a tool that we're no way affiliated with, but essentially it will help you to, you can plug in a property or an area and understand kind of what the competition is like in that area and the potential nightly rate that you could be getting for that property if you were listing it and managing it as a short-term rental. So that's kind of a great starting point if you're doing the maths on long-term rental versus short-term rental. I encourage you to check out that as kind of a first piece. I think that higher return piece is an obvious one, but it's always helpful to actually know how much higher return, like, what am I playing with, right? So I definitely recommend going and checking out airdna.co for that. So moving ahead though, I want to talk about more than just that higher income, higher revenue piece. I want to go into a bit more detail on a few different areas. So beyond higher income, short-term rentals come with some pretty compelling tax advantages as well. So unlike long-term rentals, you don't need to qualify as a real estate professional to take advantage of tax losses on short-term rentals. You do need to meet a minimum participation requirement, which I'll explain a little bit later. But the threshold for that is actually far more achievable for most investors as well. So we'll get into that in a bit more detail, but it's something that is quite intriguing and probably something that should interest a lot of you if you don't already know about it. And I think another key is that with short-term rentals, you can actually leverage cost segregation studies to accelerate depreciation, meaning you can front load some powerful tax savings. And this is, again, a place where short-term rentals shine versus long-term rentals. So I know that some of you are thinking that sounds great, but managing short-term rental must be a nightmare compared to a long-term tenant. Obviously, here's the truth: with the right software, it's not nearly as much work as you might imagine. Obviously, there's tools like Hospitable that automate repetitive tasks like guest messaging, calendar syncing, even coordinating cleaners. That means you can keep your focus on scaling your portfolio instead of being glued to your phone 24/7. And if you really want to dig in and kind of learn about kind of the tools and resources for managing short-term rentals, a little later on, I'm actually going to share a free course that you can go and check out. 3 hours of content there that's going to help you to kind of systemize and automate your short-term rental business. We're going to do kind of a light touch version of it today, but if you are super intrigued, stick around. We're going to delve into that a little bit deeper. I'd love to actually ask in the chat before we kind of get going into the tax piece a little bit more, who's kind of looked at short-term rental before? Maybe is managing long-term rental, but has looked at short-term rental, but is kind of still on the fence. Would love to kind of, see who's STR curious, if there is anyone. And hopefully I can figure out where the chat is from my toolbox again.
Yeah, I see it. I don't see any responses just yet, but I will tell you, I've always been in long-term real estate. That's been my particular focus. I've done flips. I've done a lot of different things. I do not own a short-term rental. So I would say I'm the person you just said, Miles, to be honest.
So we've got to convert Liz by the end of the call. I like it. That's my target.
Do it.
We can get you at least, Liz. Okay, good. Awesome. Okay, let's talk taxes then. And so let's break down the tax comparison a little further. Throughout this, there's going to be multiple call outs, so please consult your CPA. This is not official tax advice. It's just a suggestion of a thing that you should go and look at. I always have to clarify that. But if we look at long-term rentals, your tax losses are typically considered passive. That means unless you qualify as a real estate professional, you can't use those losses to offset your W-2 or other active income. So if you have a W-2, it's a great idea to think about having one of those investments as short-term rental. With short-term rentals, the rules are a little different. As long as you meet the material participation standards, you can, your tax losses can offset your income sources, which is huge. It means STRs can provide immediate tax benefits instead of forcing you to carry forward losses year after year. And again, always consult your CPA on this, but we'll get into a bit more detail on that now. So you might be wondering what exactly counts as a short-term rental in the eyes of the IRS. I believe this definition is up to date, but the definition is simply if the average guest stay is 7 days or fewer, it's a short-term rental. So I think Connie mentioned at the start that she's doing midterm rentals. They're probably not going to count here. We're looking at 7 days or fewer for the average stay. So you've got to be thinking about that for the property that you're trying to list or categorize as a short-term rental. And it doesn't matter if you're using Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, your direct booking website. It doesn't matter where you're kind of listing that and trying to drive bookings. Ultimately, it's the length of stay that the IRS cares about there. And so if your average stay creeps above 7 days, the property might get classified as a midterm or long-term rental. So that's going to limit your advantages. So something to think about, you can let a couple of longer stays in, but your average for the year needs to be 7 days or fewer. Okay. And so let's talk about that participation piece that I talked about previously. I kind of hinted on that and qualifying as a real estate professional. So let's actually share the numbers around that. So because this is the piece that makes STR benefits so unique. So there's a couple of paths to qualify. Either you can work at least 100 hours per year on your short-term rental and ensure nobody else spends more time on it than you. So your cleaners can't be, one cleaner can't be doing everything and spending more than 100 hours per year on it, if that's the number you're aiming for. Or you can work at least 500 hours on your short-term rental throughout the year, sorry. 500 hours sounds quite a lot. The 100 hours is what a lot of people tend to aim for. And there's obviously plenty of ways you can get to that and show that you're spending time on your business. So these thresholds, though, are much more attainable than qualifying as a real estate professional in the long-term rental world. Some of you may have already qualified as that, and fantastic. But if you haven't, this is a great way to get in that real estate professional status. And it's one of the reasons why STRs are so attractive for everyday investors who are actually doing it alongside another job or another business as well. Okay, and then I think one other big tax advantage piece that I wanted to get into was cost segregation. So normally depreciation spreads the cost of your building over decades, but with short-term rentals, you can use a cost segregation study to break the property down into components like appliances, fixtures, and other improvements that you do to kind of improve the short-term rental. And these will deprecate much faster, these individual components. So add in bonus depreciation, and you can take a significant portion of that depreciation upfront, creating major tax advantages in your first years of ownership. And once again, this is where a good CPA is worth their weight in gold. So don't go this alone. Speak to your CPA about the potential of doing a cost segregation on short-term rentals. So yeah, again, in the chat, I think I'd love to, or even from you, Liz, I'd love to understand, did you know about kind of the tax advantages of a short-term rental?
Or yeah, I mean, what's beautiful with cost seg, and we're actually going to have a speaker at next year's Investor Con who's talking about cost seg and a lazy 1031 and a ton of tax advantages, which is really cool and useful. What's interesting though is that most investors think cost seg is really just for the larger buildings and for large multifamily, and it's not, right? You could do a cost seg on a single family. It just depends on different components to ensure it makes sense. But that was something that I learned, not recently, but when I was looking at costs, I'm like, oh, I can't do that on a single family. But yes, you can. It just depends on the numbers, the value, all the above. Nice. Oh, Angie's saying, yeah, made a world of difference. Yeah, it really is. There's such a strategy behind this, Miles. It's not just I buy this property, I get tenants or folks to come in, and then it's like cruise control. There's a lot of different strategies. But yeah, it's a great reminder, especially because I think people don't think cost seg with smaller properties. So it's great reminder.
100%. Good, awesome. So hopefully there we've kind of talked about some of the benefits of short-term rentals. I'm going to get on to a little bit about kind of the effort that goes into a short-term rental. And before I do that, I will bring up this course again towards the end, but in case anyone ends up needing to drop early or anything, I encourage you to scan the QR code, visit the link now. As part of this, I'm kind of doing an introduction to how to move from long-term rental to short-term rental. It's a fairly short webinar we've got today. We're going to save some time for Q&A, but we actually have some in-depth resources that go into a lot more detail of like all the different steps of kind of starting your first short-term rental. Our presenter for this course, Matt Kruger, he's one of our customers that has actually, I think he has 6 long-term rentals, and in the past few years he's added 3 short-term rentals, and he basically just talks about his journey of doing that. And how he's automated steps along the way. He'll talk a little bit about hospitable in there, but he's also just kind of generally talking about the different steps that you need to do, and the things that you need to think about that maybe you haven't thought about yet if you're only doing long-term rental. Definitely worth checking out. It's 3 hours of videos. Do it at your own pace. Totally free. You just have to put in your name and email address, and that's all. So encourage you to check it out. I'll do another call out for that towards the end as well. Cool. Okay, so let's get into the power of automation. So now you've seen the advantages of short-term rentals. The natural question is actually, how do I manage all this without it taking all over my life? And that's where automation comes in. So with the right software, hosting becomes a scalable business instead of a second job, or a third job, or a fourth job. I don't know how many businesses you have on the go and how many properties you have on the go. And you can offload the repetitive, time-consuming tasks, deliver a better guest experience, which is super important in short-term rentals, and keep your focus on where it matters, on your strategy and your next investment. Okay, so one of the biggest pain points for new hosts is definitely guest communication. So we've got a lot more guests, a lot more tenants essentially, and we have to do a lot more communication than we have to do with long-term rentals. So guests also are expecting quick professional responses, and that can feel overwhelming if you're juggling multiple properties at once. Software obviously solves this. AI can instantly respond to inquiries, send pre-scheduled check-in and check-out instructions, and even answer FAQs like what's the Wi-Fi password, where can I park my car, am I allowed to use the hot tub after 11 p.m., whatever the question is. And the idea is that guests are still going to get timely, personalized communication, and you don't have to be glued to your phone all of the time. Obviously, this is something that Hospitable does, but I would encourage you, if you are going to short-term rentals, just kind of check out guest message. Can't speak today. Perfect for a webinar. Guest messaging automation. Another great company that does this is HostBuddy AI. They're really kind of one of the best in class resources for messaging. If you are looking for kind of a standalone solution around messaging in particular.
Quick question, Miles. Do you find that the automation also extends for like kind of, how should I say this? When folks are, they get the, I don't want to call them what is the name of the, you're not a tenant. They're a
guest.
I guess. Thank you. I'm like losing it myself. Seriously.
It's okay. We'll get through it together, Liz.
Oh my gosh, we're doing it together. Okay, a guest. So my point though is like when people are, hey, I want to maybe potentially use a short-term rental. I haven't really committed. And there's a little bit of like a marketing and a sales process before they commit. And then what you're saying is once they are a guest, is there an automation that's created for that part of the process to enroll, to sell them on possibly the unit? Is that something that you guys do or your software does?
Yeah, 100%. So there's tools and softwares for kind of improving your listing on Airbnb.
Okay.
We don't do that specifically ourselves. Rank Breeze, as in like improving your ranking. Rank
What is it
Breeze.
called?
Rank Breeze. I'll type it in the chat as well. I can't remember the website address, but it's, if you search that into Google, I'm sure they'll come up. So they're specifically focused on improving kind of how your the listing for the property appears on Airbnb. But then as soon as you get kind of a request to book to come into
I
your
see. You guys
property,
take over.
that's when we take over. Exactly. Yeah. And that's
Okay.
where automation kicks in for you, basically answering questions, kind of upselling and encourage them to stay with you. And that's super important because actually that request a book, you've got to be super responsive from the get-go, because if someone's quickly looking for somewhere to stay next weekend
Absolutely.
and you don't respond quickly, they're going to go and check somewhere else out as well, right?
No, that's a great perspective, because the goal is to automate all of it, right? And to
Yeah.
really buy your time back, right? We keep talking about that in our Strive community, and a lot of the content we're creating is how do we buy our time back? So it's not just the guest interaction, but it's okay before you get there, right? And to
Yeah.
really optimize and enroll the right type of people to come to your property. So that's great resource. I hadn't heard of that. So that's great. We'll put that in the
Yeah, please
recording notes
check
as
them out.
well.
Yeah, sounds good. And yeah, and I'd say around that as well that we all also often encourage people to actually have instant book turned on these platforms. So Airbnb is an option where you can have instant booking. So essentially, if you're using a property management software like Hospitable or another one, you can have instant booking turned on and not be worried that you're going to get like a double booking or anything like that, because you've got a software controlling your calendar, preventing any kind of mishaps like that, and you're automating everything. So it doesn't matter when a booking comes in, like you're going to automatically be messaging guests, even if you're on vacation, if it's the middle of the night, that whole process can be automated. So we encourage you to just have instant booking turned on. And that's actually one of the things that Rank Breeze would probably tell you, is that increases your ranking as well, because basically Airbnb prefers that because it's a better guest experience. If I want to stay somewhere, I want to be able to book that place immediately. So we always encourage people to have instant booking turned on if you're using a software to help you manage that process post booking.
Is that a separate like, kind of service, or you're saying put instant book? I know I'm sounding like a moron, but I'm not familiar.
No. On Airbnb, there's basically a toggle
You
in your
can do
account
that. Okay. Great.
for the property. Turn it on. Turn on instant booking. We encourage you to do that. Cool.
Okay, great.
Good. Okay, so a couple of points. So property security, I think this is something that often comes up as well. So smart locks are something that's really kind of transformed the short-term rental industry. I'll be honest, I don't know how popular and how in use they are on long-term rentals. Probably not as much, because you only have to pass a key to a tenant once a year maybe, or once every couple of years, so hopefully you don't have to worry about that as much. But with short-term rentals, if you have people checking in every few days or once or twice a week, it's a bit of a pain to be managing physical keys. So instead of managing physical keys, the old school kind of little metal thing, software can actually generate unique access codes for each guests and send those to the smart locks. And those codes only will work for the dates of the booking and automatically expire after checkout. So that guest can only get in at the appropriate days and times. So it's safer, there's no risk of losing keys, and it creates a seamless arrival experience for your guests. So one popular lock brand that people use, we see a lot of our customers use, is Schlage, which is a funny one to pronounce. I think it's a German brand, or Yale, and I'll drop those in the chat as well. Those are kind of a good idea to take a look at. They're Wi-Fi connected, and what we automatically do, and a lot of other software providers do, is we're actually going to send the last 4 digits of the guest phone number as the lock code, right? So we automatically message that to the guest on your behalf, and we automatically send it to the lock, so that magically when they arrive at check-in time, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hopefully it's a more complicated number than that, and they're into the property. And like I say, once they've checked out, the code doesn't work anymore, so they can't be going back in after they've already should have left the property.
Great.
Cool. So speaking a bit more about security as well, I think again, with short-term rentals, there's a bit more, I wouldn't say fear, but concern over kind of that turnover, and you don't know who your guest is as much. You're not doing as in-depth check sometimes as you would on a long-term rental. So protecting your property is just as important as welcoming guests. What you can actually do is you can now do guest verification and actually automatically screen your guests before they arrive with technology. So you can actually do a guest verification online. They have to drop in their driving license, take a little selfie of themselves, and we and other services are able to verify that they are who they say they are. Their ID matches their credit card, and they're not on any kind of shady list with Airbnb or anything like that. And you can make sure that you're confident in who you're accepting into your property. And another piece of that is rental agreements. Seeing this becoming more and more common. Obviously, it's super common for midterm rentals. Seeing it more common with short-term rentals as well. You can automate sending a rental agreement that the guest has to sign and not send the check-in instructions until like that has been signed, basically. So you can automate that whole process. They have to sign it. If they ignore your messages, they're not going to get the information of how to get to the property and how to get in, basically. So that's definitely a kind of a security check that we recommend people implement as well. But again, it can be totally automated. Once you've got your rental agreement drafted up, it's easy to just add it into that process of messaging, basically. Cool. And then another piece I kind of talked about briefly earlier was cleaner management. So again, more turnovers. So we need to keep the place clean. And I think one of the most stressful parts, in all honesty, of hosting short-term rentals is coordinating cleaners. You don't have to be getting up at the early hours to make sure that the place is turned over and cleaned, ready for the next guest. Certainly if you've got back-to-back bookings. But again, with automation, you don't have to worry about that. There are cleaner marketplaces available. Again, I'm going to put some in the chat. So there's one called Cleanster and Turno. And these are both tools that basically, it's a marketplace of trusted providers. You can go on there, you can find cleaners in your area that are trusted and that are used by other short-term rental hosts. They've got ratings on there in the same way that you would get a rating on an Airbnb. You can see the rating for the cleaner, same way that you would for an Uber driver. And basically, you can also then use the software to automate managing the tasks for that cleaner, right? So Cleanster, Turno do it. We do it ourselves as well. Once there's a checkout, you're going to automatically message the cleaner that, okay, they've gone, you can come in now and do the cleaning, but they're already going to have it on their task calendar for the week ahead. So as soon as a booking comes in, we can automatically be adding that cleaning task to their calendar and their schedule, so they know well in advance as well. And then there's the reminders like the week of and the day of to make sure that they don't miss and there's no issues there as well.
Just want to check in quickly with anyone in terms of questions. One question I have, Miles, is for all these other recommendations like the rank breeze and the Wi-Fi, the property security place. I'm just looking at my other screen called Yale. These the links that the companies you're recommending, and then obviously for cleaning, are these how does all of that fit together in what one kind of streamed automation? You know, and I know it's not one automation because you're using different companies, if you will. But is there a particular strategy that if I'm hearing this and I'm like, okay, I want to make this as simple as possible and potentially utilize these different tools for the process? What is there a recommendation on how to do that? I don't know if I'm articulating the question, but I want to see how women can save time through the process by these different companies.
Yeah, 100%. So I think the key thing here is that I don't know, sound too salesy, but a property management software like Hospitable or one of our competitors is kind of how you tie all this together. So I think most of the things I've spoken through already. So I'm checking back through my own slides. So guest messaging, property access, the guest verification piece, the management of cleaners, maybe not the finding cleaners itself, but the management of cleaners is something that Hospitable does. And then these kind of, I guess, softwares and solutions I've suggested are alternative solutions, but they also plug into Hospitable. So that's what we find a lot of people in the short-term rental space doing is, okay, they might pick Hospitable and they use us for the majority of things like the messaging and the guest verification. But what they might do is they might go and trial Turno and they might go, oh, that's actually, I prefer how this tool works and I'm going to try that tool as well, kind of thing. Or instead of kind of Hospitable's cleaning management. And a great thing about a lot of these tools is, all these tools, they plug into Hospitable. It's seamless. We pass the data to them. So we're aligning the calendars and everything's kind of working seamlessly. And Turno is a great example of a company where the software is actually free if you're connected to Hospitable. Because again, they see the value of like, oh, we want to be that value added service. It's the marketplace that they see as kind of the value added service of finding local cleaners. but you can actually automate a lot of it in Hospitable from the get-go. Property management software is really kind of the central point and the thing that you're going to be choosing as you go into short-term rental space.
So one step further is, as you're determining, do I have an effective software? Am I using a software?
Yeah.
And if I'm considering a software, does it have the capability that you're describing? Because then it's really a one-stop shop. And that's a big decision-making kind of question that I think a lot of investors don't really put enough energy and time into. And then they move forward on some software and they really didn't do the due diligence to assess, can this do what I needed to do across the board, like in the whole process, like one system versus it being piecemeal. It's very overwhelming.
So yeah, 100%. So see these slides as kind of a checklist of like, okay, I need something that's going to do this well, this well, this well. And as you're shopping around for, if you want to do this and you want to have a property management software, make sure that it does all these things and it's doing them well and it's highly regarded in that sense. Do your research, check on ChatGPT, check on Reddit, check in the forum, see what other people's experience are, and don't be afraid to ask questions from other short-term rental hosts out there. I think the short-term rental community, just like I'm sure the investor community is, it's very friendly, and people are willing to share information with you and kind of share their learnings as well. Cool. So I think I'm just going to cover off two more major topics on that checklist, and then we'll do a little bit of conclusion and we'll wrap up and make sure there's time for any audience questions as well. So I think the other one is pricing. We spoke at the start about airdna.co being a good place to basically go and look and understand how much could I make. How much you can make for the given year is one thing, but how to actually effectively price your property for each night of the year is another. So again, super important that you look at a dynamic pricing software or that your property management software does dynamic pricing as well. And this is something that Hospitable includes as part of the subscription. It's for no additional fee because again, we think it's so important. And this is basically, we're going to look at your local demand. We're going to look at your market. We're going to look at like events in your area, which might impact the price that you can charge, and we're going to help you help you set an effective nightly rate. And so basically, you don't want to set your price too low that you book 100%, but you're not making enough money. We want to make more money than a long-term rental, but you don't want to price too high that it doesn't get booked, right? It's about trying to find that sweet spot and getting the highest return possible, highest revenue per night, essentially. So that's something that a dynamic pricing solution is going to help you do. You don't want to have a flat price across the year because there's, depending on where you are in the world, where you are in the US or elsewhere, and there's obviously seasonality, there's different peaks and troughs, and you can charge different rates at different times of the year. That is something that needs to be said with short-term rentals. Obviously, it's not going to be the same consistent price throughout the year. So you can't be too stressed when you're not making as much not making as much revenue in a low season. You have to think about it as the whole year and make sure that you're using dynamic pricing to make sure that in the high season you are getting that higher revenue as well. And then I think just one final thing, and this is super central, super core to property management software. And again, kind of a key recommendation of if you want to do a short-term rental and you end up doing either you do more than one short-term rental or you list it on more than one platform, this is where kind of a property management software is essential because it's going to manage your calendar across these channels. It's going to prevent you getting any double bookings. It allows you to kind of put blocks in there for any times that you want to use the property. If it's a nice cabin in the Smokies or something, and you want to go and stay there, you can put in those blocks and make sure a guest doesn't block when you want to stay there. And essentially, you're going to use the property management software as your hub for everything to do with your calendar and your inbox across listings and across channels. So that's super important to think about as well. And something that pretty much, well, I think all property management software do. Kind of a key selling point of having a property management software is, like I say, once you get beyond one STR or more than one booking channel, you want to be doing that. So just to make it easier for you, that is kind of your checklist right there, and the kind of the full stack of STR automation. These are the things that you can actually automate if you do want to do short-term rental. These are the things that you know the right software can make very easy, and the right property management software can make it super easy. But there are obviously kind of separate tools for each of those. If you just wanted to dabble with software, that's also an option as well. We'd recommend kind of checking everything off that list. But I know that some people prefer to just, maybe they want to manage the process a bit more themselves. They just want to make sure they're doing the verification and agreements with a piece of software, but they want to manually message people. That's okay. That's an option as well. But this is kind of our recommended list of things that you want to be covering off with software. And then just before we kind of open up to any more questions from the audience, I'll share again, if you want a bit more of a deep dive on kind of how to do it, how to make the shift from long-term to short-term rentals, highly recommend this course. Please do check it out. I will also drop my email address in the chat as well if there's any specific questions for me off the back of today's webinar. And you don't want to ask them in the chat for whatever reason, feel free to ping me afterwards. I'm happy to answer those. But I highly recommend you check out this free resource. Super valuable tips there. Like I said, about 3 hours worth of video content. Watch at your own pace to kind of work your way through that course. All you need to do is share your name and email address, and then you can access that course for free.
And Miles, do you want to just speak briefly about I'll get to your question there, Connie. But do you want to speak briefly about how you guys work in terms of your software, or in how, if
Sure.
I'm listening to this, I want to jump in and take the next step, how would I do that?
Yeah, for sure. So you can obviously go to hospitable.com to learn a bit more about us. We actually do have an offer for the investor community. So I'm going to drop that URL into the
that would be
chat
perfect
as well while we're on it. So we actually do have a 25% off for 3 months. And you can go and you can do a 14-day demo. You'll actually see if you go to our website, there should be, if you go to that link, but then if you click our logo at the top, I think on our homepage, there's the ability to request a demo from our team. If you prefer to do kind of a 30-minute demo call, you can do that with our team. If you want to dive straight in yourself, you can do a 14-day free trial. And then, like I say, with that link, you can get 25% off for 3 months as well. So kind of definitely worthwhile checking out. The software starts as low as $29 per month for one property. On that plan, it doesn't include smart locks and smart thermostats. So if you want that, it's $59 per month. But $59 actually includes 2 properties. And then it's an extra $15 for any extra property on top of that. Well, that's obviously only counting your short-term rentals.
Great. That's really helpful. Let's go back to Connie here. Connie, you're asking, how does dynamic pricing work for MTRs? Can you use the software for that?
Yeah, sorry, just taking a sip of tea. Yes,
Sorry.
no worries. Yes, so for midterm rentals as well, Hospitable can help you set pricing for that. There are other solutions there as well for that. So Price Labs is an industry-leading one as well. You can use it. Basically, you can set requirements within the software to basically based on like length of stay. So most of the software actually automatically do this for you, but you can kind of set your own requirements if you wish. So you can do things like for a 20-day stay or a 30-day stay or anything over that, reduce the price by 20% or even put in a set price if you want. And so when someone comes through to book for that length of stay, they'll automatically see that pricing. But like I say, the software will actually adjust for that automatically and actually kind of do suggestions for you on what will be competitive in your market for a midterm rental. But again, there's always kind of control over that. If you kind of like, you can limit it so you can't do it midterm rental stay, or you can only do midterm rental stay, right? You can restrict your calendar so that you kind of have a certain amount of nights that are or aren't allowed to be booked in one go.
Makes sense.
Hopefully that answers the question, Connie.
Angie's asking about Hospitable. Does Hospitable integrate with Furnish Finder?
Great question. So we don't have an official integration with them. We're still waiting on them to do the build on that. We keep encouraging them. If you want to go and ask Furnish Finder to build an integration with Hospital, I'd encourage you to do so. We do have a bit of a workaround though, and we have what's called an iCal integration. And so essentially you can take a link from Furnish Finder and integrate it into Hospitable. And what that does is it will block off your calendar in Hospitable, which will allow you to block off your calendar like Airbnb and Booking.com to make sure any Furnish Finder stays don't get blocked in there. And vice versa, we can send that back to Furnish Finder. So again, if the property is already booked, Furnish Finder can't let it out to anyone. The only thing there is we can't manage messaging because we don't have like an official integration. So yeah, you'd still have to manage any messages that come through Furnish Finder, which typically are not as many because it is more focused towards midterm rental.
Yeah, that's interesting. So for the integrations like that, sounds like you guys are kind of thinking ahead, like, okay, what's the workaround, which, you know, investors want because they're like, okay, my property, you know, is there. So that's great. Even just that, that strategic thinking is great to hear. Hey, dear, good to have you on here. She's asking for dynamic pricing. How is that calculated? Where is the data being pulled from to determine pricing? So how do you guys get that?
Yeah, great. So we actually pull in from a bunch of different data resources, but we're essentially looking at a number of things. So we actually can look at the performance of properties in the local area and their historical performance, and also the performance of your property. So we're not going to see much historical performance if you've just turned it into a short-term rental, obviously. But if you have been managing it as a short-term rental, we can actually go back and look at how has that property performed at different times of the year over time. And at the same time, we're also looking at how is the rest of the market pricing their property for the year ahead, and what are the local events that are happening as well. So that's just kind of like 3 of the data resources. There's like 20 or 30 data sources I think we pull from, but it's kind of combining all of this information. And there's an algorithm in the background that's basically taking all that information to figure out how I should price my property. And with all of these software, including ours, you have the ability to kind of tweak it as well, right? So you can come into ours and just be like, I want to be a bit more aggressive with my pricing. I want to actually try and like, I don't want to be taking bookings unless I get about 10% more per night kind of thing. You can go in there and just kind of like push it up a little bit. You might not get as many bookings. Obviously, like our recommendation is the recommendation for kind of the optimal range in what the algorithm thinks, but you can play around with it. You know your market as well. If you've got experience in the market, you might think, well, I know that this weekend is like really peak demand. Labor Day is like when everyone comes to this part of town, and that's when you can kind of jump in and you can manually push things up yourself if you so wish as well. So you can still have control if you don't fully trust AI and automation just yet. Hopefully that answers your question, dear.
Makes sense. That's helpful to consider. So as you're thinking about any other questions that you want to answer, I'd love to see in the chat box the takeaways from today, and what one action are you going to take? Sign up with Hospitable is certainly a great action. It could be so many other things. So many other things can lead to overwhelm and honestly of inaction. And that's what we want to avoid with any sort of content, webinar, anything we do at InvestHer. It's about moving the needle and taking one action away that you're going to do like today. And that we can say, even by, you put your head down on the pillow tonight, you're going to take. That's what this is about. So I'd love to hear if anyone has any of those one action that they're being inspired to take as a result of today would be great, because that's the kind of work we're doing, right? We're not learning things in dormantly. We're learning them in real time and really just moving the needle. That's how success happens. Joy, visit their website today. Well, that's good. Definitely use the link because you get a % off for InvestHer. I'll just pop it in here again. So definitely use that link. Don't just go to hospitable.com because you get an extra amount off. So that's great to hear. And also please share takeaways. What landed for you? What was really helpful for you to learn today? A learning or an action step, either or is always great. For me, what was really interesting, especially as a complete newbie to the world of STR. I mean, I've stayed in them, but I don't own any of them yet. Yeah. But the power of what you've built with a software that has automation really from A to Z and the plugins is is really robust. I didn't realize that. I don't know why I was thinking you had to go to different places, but that is such a time-saving piece, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
a big learning for me. I knew you guys had that. I didn't realize how robust and how many of them you have, because there's so many pieces of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Dear, you're so excited to automate everything. Dear, how many STRs do you have? I can't recall that information. You're out in California, so I don't know if you have them in California. I know you're in California. I didn't realize I didn't realize you had STR, so that's great. And then Miles,
Yeah, I think just on your point, Liz, I think that is something that we are trying to do more of, is basically be the hub for everything short-term rental, right? We are, I mentioned that we don't have a cleaner marketplace yet, but that's something that we're hoping to actually bring out. I think it's next week actually,
what
and
is it?
we're actually
What did you?
planning
I missed that. What did you say?
a cleaner marketplace. So actually having that ability to find cleaners within the hospitable solution. We want to basically grow out to basically cover everything that you might need. I think it's at one point we're probably going to have like a accountant marketplace, so that if you need a CPA, you don't already have one, we're going to have a list of trusted advisors that you can go to. Really, we listen to host feedback and build what they ask us to build. And so every 2 weeks, we actually get on and do a town hall, live webinar. All of our customers, anyone is welcome to join, and basically we kind of reveal all the things we've been working on, but then take the time to listen to host feedback as well. So anyone that's hosting, they can chime on and tell us what we should build next.
Oh, that's neat. I would love to see that link too, if you can share that with me.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's great, because that's really, you're in real time really developing a product that people need and want. And it's evolving, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's always evolving. But I can tell you that what's not evolving and has always been a concern is time. And people want to buy their time back, and they don't buy investment properties, so it drains their time. And that's usually the reason that they get burnt out, or they're not able to grow or scale, right? And that's really what we're all about, is how do you keep buying your time back with tools, systems, and people, right? People too. It's all the above. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. I think that's really shows the testament of what you're building out. Thank you for that. So great. Awesome to hear about what you're going to do there, dear, automating everything. Take one step, one action step, and move the needle. That's what this is all about. So if anyone doesn't have any other questions or concerns, please check out Hospitable with the investor link. Thank you for sharing that 3-hour course. I think that's going to be super helpful. I'll include that as a follow-up to today's webinar. And Hospitable is one of our preferred partners, so they're not going anywhere in terms of the work they're doing and really serving STR owners. So use them as a resource. That's what I also love about softwares like yours, is that you guys are on the front line. You really know, you have intel that is so helpful for me as I become one, right? At some point that I can tap into. It's not just a software, it's knowledge, which I love that you guys do town halls. So without further ado, appreciate you being here, Miles. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for being on. Do something with what you learned. That's what I would just encourage. And check out Hospitable too. You're welcome, Angie. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Looking forward to our next session, okay?
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.